Good morning. So how is it going? In the last class, you remember, I had given a small assignment to you to work out yourself a scheme with order, sequence, transition and circulation. I hope you have covered that and you have understood this. I will just highlight a few more things which will add value to it. Then I'll switch to the next level of discussions. So basically ordering is positioning of all the spaces. Sequence is the way it is accessible, made accessible through circulation, and transition is the kind of experience people will have while going from one zone to the next zone to the next zone. Now, if the sequence is changed, then the transition changes. Order doesn't change. So what happens is sequence, transition, aided with circulation, that makes a big difference in it. I will just again quickly make another short sketch for this. One space, next space, next space. You are connecting this with, okay, one more set here. You are connecting this with a circulation path which is going from here to here to here and then this. This is circulation that we have decided. Which are the transition zones? Transition zones are in between spaces. Now actually this is not a space. This is a plane. That plane which you may give a little bit of depth. An example, in 3D, if this is one space and this is another space, you are making a transition from here to here, then this particular plane becomes your transition plane. This plane through which you are allowing somebody to walk from here to here. So this is the transition plane. Go from here, step into this particular area. This is a transition plane. If you want, we also can do one thing. We can give a depth to this transition plane. That means transition is not purely a planar without any depth. Transition is an experience when you are shifting from one particular zone to the next particular zone, this zone to this zone, through this. All these I have drawn here in terms of giving an idea as if it's architectural. No, just fill it up with any kind of vegetation. Make this a series of tree here. This becomes a transition from here to a green space, then to this. If you want, instead of giving this kind of shape, if you give a shape like this, this is nothing but arbor or trellis. I have explained this earlier in terms of elements, and then you fill it up with vegetation. This is a transition from here to this, from this to this. That transition through a vegetative element which is supported with trellis. That is how it is. So it can have a depth. Now add more depth to it. Make it like this. So your frame is running like this, and add vegetation to it. I'm trying to draw very fast so that I can do justice with my time. Means you are passing through an arcade which is made of a series of arbors. The depth that is given here is so much. So the point is, the transition that is basically referring to this zone from one space to the next space. In between that particular zone, it may be a single planar or it may be a space like this with a depth. Depending on what height, what width, how many people are passing through, what kind of treatment that you have given over here, all these will make a big difference. So this is what is the kind of experience which I am saying that you should have when you are passing through a particular space. Now here, one more thing. First, I have ordered this, then I have sequenced it from here to here in case you make a person move not from this zone but to this, and you have also given similar kind of treatment while passing from here to here, experience will be almost similar. But the moment somebody steps from this space through this transition zone to the other, immediately the other elements which are contained within the next space will make a big difference. This is what is very, very important when you are making people move through a circulation path. Now, if I summarize this particular discussion which I concluded in the last lecture, is this: you create space with subspaces. These are all subspaces of a space, subspaces. You create space, and with subspaces which are ordered, placed, static. Each of the subspace rather, is treated in different kind of forms, different kind of character, different kind of treatments, material, maybe some themes or whatever, and then you decide how a person is supposed to move through this particular space, in which sequence. So you work out the sequence. The moment you work out the sequence, you have worked out your circulation, and this is what is here, the circulation. Now, once you have made the circulation path which is going to dictate the sequence of your movement or the user's movement, and then you are shifting from one space to another, means one subspace to another subspace, then in between the spaces that you have, depending on what kind of treatment, what kind of depth, what kind of height, dimension, depth, the transition experience will come. Now, what happens is, what is important here is, in this kind of situation, basically what will happen when you are going to assess that what is the final effect of this in the mind of the viewer. Basically, you have assessed one thing, that is, start from here with, let's say, zero experience. Start from here with zero experience of what is within, and then you make them move from one to another. Each of the experience is getting cumulative. Now, another phenomenon that comes in the mental process, each of this space has different characteristics. The viewer did not know what he is going to see or he was likely to see, then he experiences the first subspace. He gets overwhelmed or disgusted, doesn't like it. He moves to the next one as per your path that you have dictated. He goes to the next one, he likes it very much, reserves it, stores in the mind, goes to the third one, he likes it more than the last one. Then you know what will happen is, if the earlier experiences are negative or poor or not very encouraging to the person who is viewing it, he will gradually keep on discarding that from his mind, from his mental storage, and then he will always try to see what is good, what is good, what is good. Now, if suppose each of the subspace is well designed, then the entirety is it's reserved in the mind of the viewer. And then when he comes out at this particular point is going to the different region, not your planned area, then he carries forward with him the experience that he had here. Now, if somebody interviews him, tries to know what was his experience, he will be able to tell you that what is the experience, because he has sensed it through the mental process, he has perceived it, what is what, and he has also analyzed through intellection process that what is good, what is bad, what is extra, what is not required, such. So he will have a cumulative experience at this particular end. So if I now try to technically say, first entry point, zero experience of this space, then on coming out is a cumulative experience. If suppose by chance each of these subspaces are poorly designed, then the total reaction of this particular person at the end is negative, did not like the landscape. If suppose out of this 6 he liked 5 and did not like 1, he may simply forego and ultimately give a benefit of other 5 being better, so comes out with a nice experience. And if the last one is the best and the first one is the worst compared to all these 6, then the first one rejected and the last one remains at the back of the mind. And in fact, I'll tell you, if each of these spaces is experienced individually, then what happens is one would always try to gather the last reactions. So it is because of this, if suppose when you design, you remember I have used a term called climax. That climax, which is an abstract principle. Now you keep on creating good, rather better and better environment, and at the end reaches climax, and then one goes out. At the climax point, if suppose one goes out, then he retains the full climax with him. If suppose there would have been a situation that you allow him to go farther, and they are a poorer design, then your climatic, the climax effect gets discounted by poorer designs. So this design of landscape with different spaces is a very nice ball game which you have to play when you are designing. You have to be always follow the same rule, like personal analogy, as if you are experiencing it. So when you put all these elements, what would be the reaction in the mind of the viewer? All these are what you can imagine what you have created. So use personal analogy. That is always better. You can also go for fantasy analogy, symbolic analogy, and all these analogies. But the thing is, personal analogy is most commonly used because all these areas are mostly natural. Okay. Then I'm coming to the other aspects of principles, that is form and character. So far what we have discussed about the abstract principles related to the expressions, how people react, or how do they experience it, and then the arrangements of space or objects. Now it is the form or character of the object or the space. So it is arrangement. The second one was arrangement, how you place them, and now it is individually each space, each object. I am just drawing the reference with the same sketch which I have shown you earlier. This refers to arrangement, but quality of this, characteristics of this space, they are related to the aspect which I am going to discuss now. With respect to form and character of the object or space, these are the items, these are principles which are very, very applicable. Let me just bring all the items in front. Dimension, line, size, mass, volume, proportion, and scale. There are many more. Basically any object or space must have a dimension, because that's a reality. In the landscape project it is there. So that must have a dimension. Now that dimension is very simple way of putting it: length, breadth, height. If it's a space and we are looking at the base plane, then it's a length and the breadth. If it's a three-dimensional object, then we see the length, breadth, and also the height. If you see a vertical element, then we see the breadth and the height. Now here there's another thing can come, is the depth. It all depends on from which point you are referring. If you are referring from this point to away, then it's a depth. So length, breadth, and the height. Here the breadth is replaced by depth. You can do it. Okay. So object has to have length, breadth, and height. Object may be of different configuration, but there should be basically a very broad dimensions of length, breadth, height. I'll just try to clarify this particular point a little more. If you have an object like this, simple object drawn, okay, understood, length, depth, height, length in terms of plan, length, breadth, and height. Okay. If suppose you have an object which is of this kind placed in the landscape site, or suppose you have an object which is placed in the landscape site like this, how would you say length, breadth, and height? In this kind of situation, basically the point is you don't have to really go for geometric measurements. No, you take the overall form of this. I will use another pen for clarity. You take the broad length, breadth, and height parameters which contains that particular object within. Take this into consideration. So whenever you are trying to look at that particular object, it is in terms of that containment, that containing cuboid. Okay. Line is orthogonal, curved, or irregular. Orthogonal is when it is at 90 degree to each other. Okay, this is orthogonal. All those gridiron patterns that you are seeing in your historic examples of Mughals or French gardens or Italian gardens, they are all mostly orthogonal. Now, then they are also angular, like this. I did not put the angular here because there could be, then if I start saying angular, then there will be also herringbones and many other, But however, angular, which is like, say, with respect to this, there is at an angle. Another one is curvilinear. That means it is of this nature. Okay, and another is irregular. This is curvilinear, means you can always make it, find out the arc length, the chord, and the radius, or whatever. But irregular is absolutely anything, any kind of things is irregular. So the point is, which one is good or bad? No, there should not be any contest about it. As we have seen mostly in our landscape projects, we have objects or plans or say layouts which are very favored in terms of curvilinear or irregular, and of course even people liked regular one, orthogonal. So this line matters. Axis, when it is a straight line going from one particular point to another particular point like this, it's an axial, which is orthogonal. If suppose you turn it in this angle, this is angular but axis. This is one axis, from there is another axis, from here there may be another axis, but the moment you make it curvilinear, it loses its strength of axis. So axis will have a start point and the end point between a line, and then intermediate there will be many more axes, transverse, and then there will be for each of those particular segments start point and the end point. But as soon as it becomes curvilinear, it loses the strength of that axiality of, or rather linearity. Okay, this is another most important principle. Then comes the size, the intrinsic size of the object. See, size is very much related with respect to the dimension, of course. Small dimension, small size. Big dimension, the big size. This is quite easily understood. The point is, when you are looking at that particular object as a component in your landscape, then how you view it. That what is that particular size you are talking about. We say it's a big size object. We say it's a small size object. It's a big garden. It's a small garden. It's a big tree. It's a small tree. It's a tall tree. It's a dwarf tree. All these are basically the the expression by which you try to give a relative idea of this. The moment you say that I have been to a landscape site and I have seen a series of big trees, nobody is going to ask you how many meter high. Nobody. But people will immediately infer in the mind that it is big. And at that point of time, if suppose somebody is trying to measure your reaction to it, then he is trying to find out that, okay, this bigness with respect to his own perception of bigness. Here the perception matters. If suppose you say, I saw a sculpture which is very large, basically what you have done, you have added one more superlative to the large. You did not say, I saw a large sculpture. You will say, I have seen a very large sculpture. You must have seen in many places nowadays we are seeing that Lord Buddha's statues are being very large. Or, the poet Guru Bayur's statue is very large in Kanyakumari, if I remember. In Gaya, I have been there, I have seen a big statue of, very large statue of Lord Buddha. The point is, when I am saying very big, I am trying to give a relative idea of this. I am not saying the dimension. If you ask me, I won't be able to tell you the dimension. But this relativeness matters. This is used as a principle. It's like, if suppose two of you are sitting here to plan and you are deciding what should be the size of it, you will say, let us make it large. Immediately others will ask how large, but this question is not to be asked at this moment. Large with respect to other, small with respect to other. Now there will be multiple such elements, so how do you really give a comparative idea of this? That's what is the size. But end of all, it has to be with a dimension. Okay, the mass. The mass is basically heavy or light. Any object that you use, the heaviness and the lightness in terms of mass, of course, it will be based on what quantity of material it is contained within. That will give you an impression in your mind that what is that heaviness or lightness, light massed or heavy mass. I'll just give one idea with respect to, let's say, if I draw a tree this is one, and then I also draw another tree. Both are of equal height. This particular region is also almost uniform in terms of its planar area, projected area, but the moment you look at it, you will say it's a heavy mass and this is a light mass. So basically it is a material contained within. That gives you a feeling of heavy or light. There are, when it comes to size, mass and all that, many things like, say, how slender it is, how tall it is, how spreaded it is, all these factors do come in. These issues I will discuss when I'll talk about the plant characteristics, not today. In the principles, I don't want to spend my time on that. Volume is large, small, dominating volume. People say it's a dominating volume. What is the dominating volume? Basically, whenever somebody is looking at it, the whole volume is, with its heavy mass maybe, almost dominates the viewer in terms of its expression. So it's a dominating volume. When you say large volume, small volume. But if you really go into it, you'll find that the small volume is restricted with a small size, restricted within maybe a light mass or a heavy mass. The volume may be the overall volume, but within that the mass is less. It's just like, if you take if you take a sort of wear measures bundled, volume is same, but the mass is less. Take a solid ball of the same size, the volume is same, the mass is less, mass is more. So the point is, how do you react to it? How do you interpret? These are all the principles that we do use. So what happens is, since the landscape subject has lot of subjective interpretation, these items which we are referring here in this kind of discussions, basically it is all up to the viewer, that how one perceives or tries to express. Then comes proportion. Proportion is dimensional. Proportion is with respect to, say, basically length is to breadth, length is to height, breadth is to height. So that is dimensional proportion. That, say, an example, let me draw. Let's look at this. In terms of plan, let me tell you. Proportionately, one would express that here the breadth is very less compared to the depth of it. That is a proportion one is saying. This is dimensional. This breadth is, say, half times of the depth. This is proportional. So what happens is it becomes a ratio. That with respect to, so here within that object or space, one aspect or one element of it is compared with respect to the other. If I say this is in terms of dimension, suppose there is one object placed here in my landscape and there is another object placed here. Then dimensionally both are different. Mass wise both are different. Volume wise they are different. Proportionately also they are different. That means this is in smaller proportion compared to the one. So whenever it comes to proportion, you will always find that people will fall back on a relativeness of one to another. Okay, similar is the scale. The scale is again dimensional, but also relative. Scale is dimensional is that one particular object in this, let us say here itself, this particular sketch itself that we use it. In terms of scale, if I say the height is, say, x meter, the height of this is, say, 5x meter. So dimensionally I can always say this is what it is, but this is also large. Say it's large with respect to this, in a larger scale than this. Without even going into the dimension, you can always say by virtue of your seeing it that this is larger than this. So scale, whenever you are expressing, we are saying either dimensionally or with respect to relative. Interestingly, what happens is whenever we are talking about these principles, basically all these come under say one parameters which are more of expressions and less of dimensions, but in reality it is with the dimension. So when you are using any such principles in your landscape project, and then you should always feel or try to understand that what the person is going to perceive relatively, dimensionally, proportionally, that is what you have to first perceive. It will help you in that way. Okay. Other aspects: form, a profile, shape, pattern, density, prominence, and dominance. These aspects are again very, very subjective to a certain extent. But however, form and profile, we say for an object or space, whether it's a regular space or irregular space, or is it symmetric space, all these are with respect to the profile, means this profile. Okay. Is it regular? This is regular. This is irregular. So when you say with respect to profile, it may be the profile in terms of plane, planar, base plane, or profile with respect to the vertical plane, or we can say with respect to the overhead plane, or we can also say profile with respect to the three-dimensional geometry. So whenever you are expressing it, we express in these terms. The shape, let's say regular, like say my earlier sketch, regular, irregular. In terms of shape, the lines and other things will not come in. It's the overall geometry that is going to play a role. Okay. In terms of pattern, orthogonal, free-flowing, floral. If you fall back on these examples, you'll find there are plenty of such. Like say, this is pattern. This particular picture which is showing is a pattern which is floral type. Look at this one. This is orthogonal. This is orthogonal with a bit of free-flowing. See the interestingness of this particular object. Here, if you follow, this is orthogonal, of course, because they are all different spaces which are regular. And the thing is, the moment they have put a line over here, and this line is nothing but the same vegetation of a different kind with a different color, then what happens is this has created another line. So it just brought in a little bit of free flow. Here in this particular pattern, if it is floral, but still in some places you will find there is a little bit of free flow. The thing is how you express it. So in terms of spaces, in terms of objects, these are working. The density is whenever you are thinking about different elements within it, the density of that particular space or object. Now, whether it is homogeneous, you have created a landscape. For an example, this is here in this case, what happens is you have created a landscape which is homogeneous in two elements. One is the greens and there is a pavement. Look at this particular picture, means have a close look at it, you will find it is homogeneous in shape. This is axial pattern, and then in between each of these particular squares are very regularly made and very symmetrically placed one after, repeatedly placed one after another. It becomes homogeneous. But if suppose they would have made any kind of patterns here, the next any kind of patterns here, any kind of patterns here, it would have become heterogeneous. So whenever you are thinking about the density of different items in terms of homogeneity or heterogeneity, just try to understand that with respect to different elements. I'll tell you very challenging tasks. In the landscape design, whenever you are handling large number of items and they are of different material, different intrinsic quality, these items or these principles becomes very, very important to be noted. Next is prominence. Prominence is like say visual appearance of one in comparison to the other. It is something like when we say that this particular person was very prominent over there, because basically you are saying that person was prominent, it was drawing attention compared to the others. So whenever in the landscape you will find that you will give some characteristics to one particular kind of object, one or maybe more than one objects, and that will be attracting the viewer towards that with a little bit of prominence, and the prominence instilled by you by its intrinsic material, design, shapes, forms, scales and such. Okay. So something which is visual appearance of something in comparison to the rest and which catches attention. And the dominance is that when one particular object's strength dominates over the rest and the rest of the items almost falls flat in terms of the reactions, and people perceive everything, mind it. They are, see, in terms of process of mental process, everything they are seeing, everything they are perceiving, and then through intellection, the one which is more dominant by its own characteristic, intrinsic characteristics, whether it's a shape, size, scale, pattern, color, texture, whatever, it dominates. So it is basically that idea, that how it gives you a dominating effect over the others. Few more. I'll go quickly through this. It is edge, color, texture, grain. Whether it is regular edged or irregular edge or smooth. So basically it is referring to this part of it. Look at the paper. This is the edge. This is the edge that they are looking into. Okay. Whether it is, say, this is regular, this is irregular, and this is smooth, and this is rough. So point is how you give what kind of edges, that is the kind of design that you are going to view. The color, whether the color is uniform, whether the color is variegated. That means uniform color is the same color repeated. Same color repeated maybe with a bundle of it. And then variegated is when you are having the change. Okay? That means you are seeing the one color, and within that you have the variegations, one color, and then there's a patches. So if suppose you have, say, a color, say a particular leaf, let us say, I'm just giving an example with respect to the leaf. I will clarify this again when I'll give other ideas. You will find that this is green leaf within which there are some kind of patches. These are all variegations. This I am saying with respect to the leaf. You can have it in terms of space. You can have it in terms of object. The object may have uniform color. Object may have other variegations as well. Texture is the, it's not really the roughness of it. It's a pattern of the surface. Okay, on the surface, and the grain is basically the roughness of it. The rough grain, smooth grain. That means if you cut a section through a particular surface over here, it's basically how much, if I enlarge the surface, how much it is going up and down, how much recess, how much relief. That will refer to the grain, and in the texture is basically the pattern over it. Some more. Topography, the profiles, and the light. This is very, very important. The light is essentially whether it is bright or dull. This light, we are not talking about the quantity of light that it is being given, or even that how much interesting this particular picture is in the evening. No, we are not talking about this. It is the brightness or the lightness, dullness of that particular one. Again, the luminance, that means how much bright it is. So whenever we are talking about the light and the luminance together, here sometimes we deviate a bit from that standard landscape objects, because here we are adding some more elements which are very technical, non-natural maybe. But interestingly, that think about a landscape which you are seeing in a sunny day where the sun is the light sources. At that particular point you find it's very, very bright, and in the cloudy day you say it is dull. And when you look at those pictures that I've just now shown, here it is basically the luminance that it is reflecting towards you. It's not the object that is being lighted. It is the luminance that is reflecting in your eye. That will be basically with respect to that particular light or the luminance. Now, another very important principle that we do use is in the landscape is the fragrance. Fragrance is basically intrinsic characteristics of the object. Whether it is the leaf, whether it's a tree bark color, bark smell, bark's fragrance, leaves fragrance, flowers fragrance, fruit fragrance. Basically this principle we do use very much when you are trying to give a form or character. You will find that when you design a rose garden, you simply don't design the rose garden because of the look of the rose. You also design the rose garden with depending on its fragrance that it is giving. So that is also another principle we do use very, very effectively in our landscape. I'll just quickly run through few slides over here. I'm not going to explain much on this, but I will keep the slides for few seconds for you, so that whenever you are downloading this particular presentations, you have those picture palettes in your stock. And when you have that in stock, I will suggest that all the principles that we have talked about so far, try to identify those principles within. Okay? I'm just keeping it for a few seconds, one by one. I'll keep it for especially 10 seconds, not more than that for each. 10 seconds is a time which is good enough for a person to perceive a particular picture and then make senses. And in case you have missed it when you are viewing it, I would suggest you will rerun these particular slides. And you will find all the principles that you have talked about in some form or the other are in these particular slides. I'm just holding for a few seconds so that you have in your stock. And deliberately I picked up those pictures which I have discussed in the earlier sessions of the history. The reason being that when we discussed, we have mentioned many of these items with relations. I am not elaborating now any of these. I am just leaving it for your own judgment, for your own correlations with respect to all the elements and their corresponding principles that we have talked about. Okay, what you have learned so far in this, all the principles. If I try to summarize, right in the beginning we have discussed about different categories of landscape, and then different kind of historical examples, and then we have discussed about various behavioral principles which ultimately led to the design principles which I have just now concluded. We have learned up to this so far, and my suggestion is that now on we are going into the design or planning part of it. So far it's a background that we have tried to create, which will make you strong enough to understand the next steps here. So the next what lies ahead is the site analysis, which I'll elaborate in my next lecture. Enjoy it. Thank you very much.